Today's talk is co-sponsored by Hamilton Library, the Spark M. Matsunaga Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, and the Departments of Ethnic Studies, Political Science, American Studies, and Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies. And now, Cindy Franklin, professor of English at the University of Hawai'i at Manoa, and also a co-editor of Biography and Interdisciplinary Quarterly, and most importantly in this case, one of the judges for the annual Biography Prize, whose co-winner we are recognizing today, will introduce our speaker.
Hi. Aloha, everybody. This is a last-minute pleasure for me to get to do this, and introductions are one of my favorite genres. I wish I had time to do you full justice, Stephanie, but I will just say that I'm so happy to have you here today to present from your work. I got to know some of this work when Stephanie was in my 625E Theories and Methods in Cultural Studies in Asia Pacific class, and was doing some of this work on the Peace Corps, and then also as part of an MA project, and one that I encouraged her to submit. I think I encouraged you to do that. If I didn't, why not? But I think I did. Anyway, I've also had the pleasure of getting to see Stephanie. I was actually just thinking about this up at Mauna Kea as part of an autobiography as activism class at Pu'uhuluhulu University, and was thinking about how appropriate it is to have seen you up there, because you're somebody who does life writing with serious consideration of what kind of work it does for social justice movements. And you do that in such a thoughtful, probing way, and ask the really hard questions. And so it's really a pleasure to introduce you here today. I look forward to hearing you present your work. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Cindy. That was so flattering and wonderful. So I'm getting a bit of feedback on my own audio, so I'm just going to take my headphones out. Okay. Okay, so I'll just talk, and hopefully everyone is able to hear me. So for today, this piece that I'll be reading from is titled In Time, a Writer. And this piece actually grew out of a creative writing class with Professor Susan Schultz, with her prompt being to write your writer's memoir. And it was one of the first times I was allowed to conceive of myself as a writer, and it's still scary to conceive of myself in that way. So I like to hide or like shrink back behind, I guess, critical scholarship or analysis instead. And so, yeah, it's a pleasure for me. It's an honor for me, really, to be here and to be able to read from it and converse with you all. So this is less of a talk and more of a reading and a conversation, with the hope that some of my thoughts will bring others to express what resonates, what ideas that it sparks in them as they listen, how you all might be thinking through similar questions. So yes, please feel free to engage even as I read. So I'll spend about the first 20 minutes reading from 2 excerpts, and then I'll be putting up on the screen the questions that drove the writing, as well as the ones that emerged as I was trying to work those questions out. So I will just share my screen here. Okay. So, why do memoirs begin in childhood? Why do memoirs begin in childhood? Could it be due to the distance between the child self and ourself? We see our child self not as the hazy reflection behind unkempt glass, but as the girl with the small features standing across the lake, frozen. Her hair braided by her grandmother, her attire picked out, barely able to put on a pair of skates, barely fitting their smallest pair, barely moving without holding a hand, barely there, a starting point. The two girls are a space-time apart, one unaware of decision-making, the other frozen under its weight. Clothes to shoes, hair to brush, poems to write, life to lead. One being is accounted for by others, while the second must account to others about herself. One being in two objects, begging for a line, a hook to connect the dots. If a physical one can't be found, make it literary. Something to say that we are more than the sum of our choices and what others choose for us. In life, physical and moving, the child self seems fixed, gone, done. The future appears before us, open, possible, capable of changing with our decisions, resulting in that weight, the burden of free will experienced in the present. It's not our fault, really, that we tend to experience and write of a time as a linear progression. Many of us live it as such. We're informed by our psychology, culture, and biology. Most importantly, we're informed by the laugh lines forming on our parents, the way our children grow up, the ascending birthdays year round. My writer self feels this as she anxiously checks the age at which her favorite authors and scholars publish their first work, as if somehow age could foreclose or open possibility. On his Wikipedia page, Alexander Chi is said to be born on August 21st, 1967. Under his list of works, his first book, Edinburgh, was published in 2011. So 2011 minus 1967, he was 44. 44 minus 28 is 16. The number meaningless still gives her a sigh of relief, 16 years before she should let anxiety run again. Zora Neale Hurston, it says, was born on January 7th, 1891, finished high school in 1918 at age 26, another sigh of relief. Even in the realm of English studies, our arguments and close readings are caught by time. Take one word and look at its etymology, the history of a word's origin as traced back to its Latin roots and not the other way around. Like a flash of lightning, dazzling our eyes, we're tricked by our own senses and a sleight of hand that makes it seem as if thunder came seconds after lightning. It doesn't help that there's massive intersubjective agreement that living in the world means we move towards our death and away from our birth. The philosopher Craig Callender calls our experience of time flow an illusion. That is, the distance between you and the girl across the lake can in fact be traversed. She looks at you as you look at her, wondering whether to swim or look for a boat. In the literary realm, time does not seem so one-dimensional, so one-directional. While the most pressing intersubjectivity shared is perhaps between those experiencing the present together, poetry and prose have the power to exert another intersubjective experience upon the reader. As we read, we're brought into the mind of another that is still our own. As we write, we can traverse time, not just see the past, but experience a past that is not yet foreclosed. The past is not contained in artifacts to be excavated, but just as much of an open space as our experience of the future. Vice versa, stories allow us to experience the future as foreclosed, offering a sigh of relief to that adult self, anxiously stuck in decision-making, fearing that seemingly infinite far-off space. With that in mind, let's read forward to the beginning, not in the sense of fast-forwarding through the opening credits to get to the story. Let's read forward to the beginning, knowing that we reinvent the beginning from this point now. My starting point as a writer is as a girl listening intently to a cassette tape, sitting on the couch next to her grandfather in one of the many yellow-gray high-rises in Beijing. She listens to the narrator's warm cadence as snow falls outside, unaware that this will be her first storied memory. The steady voice tells the tale of Kongrong, the youngest child of a family, and thus in Chinese culture, the one who receives the best share of everything. One day, Kongrong is given first choice from a plate of pears. They're pears of all shapes, sizes, ripenesses, and colors. He uses the opportunity to choose the smallest and least appealing one for himself, saving the best for his family. Embodied within this folktale are not only the qualities of a well-behaved and thoughtful child, but the Chinese values of sharing and recognizing relational hierarchies. As she listens, she is Kongrong, seeing the pick of pears in her mind's eye and deciding on the small, bruised lobe. I am Kongrong 22 years later, in a continent away, proudly telling my mom I can cover the cost for her home office, to spare no expense. 你的女儿真懂事, I picture her friends saying when they found out her daughter had purchased it for her. 懂事. That's how the family praises the girl for choosing the least appealing thing for herself and never eating the last bite of anything. Dong means to understand or to know. Shi means things or matters. The towards the end, turning things and matters into the Beijing accent. Roughly translated, it means to understand things. To understand things, of course, means comprehending the matrix of relationships and acting accordingly, prompting others to notice how well you know your place. What did she understand? She understood she had to call her elders, older sister, older brother, auntie, uncle, grandma, or grandpa. She knew that these elders were obligated to do and give their best to her, and that it was her role to decline their generous offer. Even better, if given the choice, she should consciously choose the worst option for herself so that the remaining share was better for others. When she demonstrated that understanding, they didn't call her generous or kind, selfless or good. They simply acknowledged that she seemed now to understand things. What happens to understanding when it leaves the ground? Once it flies from that couch in Beijing and lands at JFK Airport. In the immigration detention center, a lady with brown hair, brown and not black, you thought, says something to a lady with black hair on her right. Turning the noise to language, the black-haired auntie asks, 你为什么来美国? Why did you come to America? My girl answers, 我妈妈, my mama. To this day, I don't know why my father told me the real reason for the trip to Florida, expecting me to repeat the lie of visiting Disney World as a tourist. Didn't he know that mama rolled easier off the tongue than Disney? Didn't he know that his parents had raised an intent listener of stories? That she would sense this truer story of being reunited with her mother, even if her passport was stamped with a tourist visa? Didn't he know that she would give what was asked of her by her elders? Maybe he couldn't have expected his 6-year-old to be taken into independent questioning, but he should have expected what happened after. Done accounting to her elders on the reasons for the trip, she pulls a seaweed snack from her backpack and offers one to each of the black and brown-haired ladies. It's no substitute for pears, but still her best snack. She hoped that they would see her as a girl who understands things. That night, she was escorted to a room with an agent while the adults figured things out. She remembers a window, the snow, and no stories. Maybe stories adapt once they fly from family homes, evolve for transmission across generations. Why would they not also have some hidden wing for transmission across spaces, cultures, borders, and contexts? The Kongrong story had a significant gap, or maybe it was she who had the gap, showing itself in independent questioning. Namely, that not everyone is an elder. Not everyone, by virtue of their older age, will have your best interests at heart. They might interpret your offer of choice pairs as a ploy, a plot, maybe a plea. Pick your elders not the way you pick your pears, lest the story turn nectar to poison. Show your understanding to those who understand, appreciate, commend, praise, teach, and nurture. Elders that will offer their best to you whether or not you follow the moral of the story. Pick those that will share a matrix of understanding with you, whom your actions will be guided by in the future. This is how I chose the writers to call auntie, uncle, big brother, big sister, grandma, and grandpa. While many writers will, by virtue of literary time, be older than you, not all will be writing with your best interest in mind. In fact, some through beautiful language and exquisite logic have and will actively deny your past and future. Those are not your elders. So that was the first excerpt from the beginning. And the second excerpt comes from a bit later, after my time in the Peace Corps as a volunteer in Madagascar. And it's a critique of my own writings about the experience of service, both in the form of the application essay that was required for entrance and the blog that I kept throughout service. So the question driving this is, how does one write of American violence without enacting it? I wish I had considered that question before foraging into the blogosphere during my years of Peace Corps service, peddling peace and friendship as a 20-something child to the southern eastern coast of Madagascar. Even in its application, I'd written to address the following prompt. Quote, Peace Corps service presents major physical, emotional, and intellectual challenges. In the space below, please provide how you plan to overcome the various challenges. To which I replied with the arrival to America's story, although erasing key elements. So I write in the application essay, clutching my carry-on bag of stuffed animals, I step off my plane at age 6. With ears trained to pick up Mandarin, I couldn't understand the unfamiliar language spoken by strangers all around me at the JFK airport. Not fazed by my lack of understanding, I entered the US with eager and curious eyes. 17 years later, this initially foreign country is now my home. Consequently, my mind still associates the unknown not with fear, but with anticipated familiarity. Deeply immersed in contrasting cultures from a young age, I've always acted as informal cultural ambassador between my American friends and my Chinese relatives. Unsurprisingly, the Peace Corps vision of promoting peace and friendship lines with my own. She didn't understand. Oh, this is after the excerpt. She didn't understand, didn't see the irony, but did see the necessity of omitting the fact that the country which interrogated her coming and policed her entrance was now asking her to face challenges elsewhere as their messenger of peace. Maybe the idealist self writing the statement, wanting to do good, forgot that day at JFK, which began the association of fear to the unknown. Did she mean the anticipated familiarity of interrogation, first by immigration officials disguised as elders and then from teachers and friends? She also didn't see the irony either in her blogging, which she fashioned as a public journal following the familiar narrative arc of first contact, ethnographer, and moral progress. So that this goes from the blog, peering out of the oval window of flight, SA 1792, I was immersed in an incredible amount of stars below and above me. And as if on cue, One Republic's Counting Stars came on with the lyrics saying, lately I've been losing sleep, dreaming about the things that we could be. Baby, I've been thinking hard, said no more counting dollars, we'll be counting stars. Yeah, we'll be counting stars. It's striking when such beautiful song lyrics become literal in your life. It was at this moment that I no longer felt like an imposter wearing a Peace Corps t-shirt. It was at this moment I felt like the commitment I was making was beginning to be real. The little pieces of reality, like the plane ride, reminded me that I was following my ideals one step at a time. So that was the blog, and my analysis of it is dumb, predatory, sentimental, to borrow Morrison's words. The author would expand that, quote, oppressive language does more than represent violence. It is violence. does more than represent the limits of knowledge, it limits knowledge, end quote. To represent a space, and in particular Africa, as a site of American self-fashioning. What was she, this version of me, thinking? In Toni Morrison's radically insightful work, Playing in the Dark, Whiteness in the Literary Imagination, she discusses how American themes of individualism, freedom, and innocence depend on the manifestly unfree existence of a Black population. Haunting American literature is what Morrison reveals to be assigning Africanist presence, or the specific signs, codes, and literary strategies designed to accommodate the encounter between white and Black, free and unfree. Seems that the phenomenon today can be exported, with the focus being modern versus pre-modern subjects. So how does one write of the experience without using the Africanist presence? How can you write in a way that is not putting forth grand ideas of development or morality or finding yourself at the expense of others? The funny thing about the blog's genesis was that it was born out of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's talk on the dangers of a single story. In fact, part of our Peace Corps pre-arrival training, the Nigerian novelist warns that if we hear only one story about a culture or a country, we risk misunderstanding it and its people. So the remedy is not always to retell that single story. At face value, volunteers were taught that lending their personal experience of writing about the country would somehow be the multiplicity of voices that Madagascar needed. Rethinking now, perhaps Adichie's lesson, like Honrong's lesson, needed some hidden wings to come through context. Didn't register at the time that we were the single story. Many voices, sure, but iterating that single story nonetheless. It's the one where good-intentioned young idealists primed by their elders who have provided for them and passed on the values of service needed a recipient to practice their values. Perhaps in Chinese culture, they would be seen as those rare young ones who understand that their humanity is tied to others, as the pre-arrival Peace Corps trainers stressed. What happens to understanding when it lifts off the ground? From JFK to Addis Ababa to Johannesburg, and finally touching down in Ivatu, Madagascar. From one's bubble of elders that supported such understanding and encouraged them to serve others. Maybe the gap here, like the one found in Korong, is that your elders do not know everything. More heartbreakingly still, they can extend kindness and hope to you while destroying and erasing others. Bring Korong's pears to Madagascar, and they'll ask you whether you got them from the foreign market, where the bazaar or foreigners do their shopping. They'll suggest you pick local mangoes instead, tastier and free. Why pick from the plate when there's trees so heavy with fruit you have to walk through the stink of their abundance for weeks after? Dear reader, does it seem like I'm coming to an end, an understanding, now that I've lived and learned? I apologize if the progression of time and essay make it seem so. It is not your fault. I'm afraid we've been writing less towards answers and more towards crossing the lake. To the girl with the small features, there she is, standing, her hair braided white, her attire old and worn. She waits for the girl to skate across the ice towards her, barely able to stand upright, barely remembering time, barely able to move without holding a hand. Barely there, I offer her pears.
Okay, thank you very much. And people are expressing that thanks as well too. I guess we're in a place now where we can invite people to ask questions or offer comments. And as Zoe's putting in there, and what I'd start off with is just to provide that life writing continuity. Where are you now, and what are you doing? And what are you writing?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
It's a little soft, but it's okay.
Okay. Sorry. I know we've been having this issue, but now I'm in Ithaca, New York, first year PhD student in the Department of Literatures and English at Cornell University. And every time someone asks me what you're studying, I say that the general interests right now are thinking about how 19th century American literature might tie in to current narratives of development. And yeah, that's sort of the place I'm at right now. And it is still critical work and less so creative work. But I think that that is what I'm like writing towards, is the more creative side. I think I just have to build the courage and reading and expertise to get there.
This is from Cindy Franklin. Such great work, Stephanie, and I hope it is a testament to your work and the themes you are exploring so carefully that I was thinking about your other narratives for your MA in 625 in relation to this work that you started in Susan's class when I introduced you. And Alex Peregrina is asking, thank you for speaking today. Your work sounds very interesting. What was the name of the Nigerian novelist you mentioned?
Yeah, so her name is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I can type it into the chat.
There we are. Good. Other questions or comments? This is from John Zern. It's so good to hear that you're carrying on your engagement with the ideas of development you were pursuing while you were taking my class. Everybody's laying claim.
Oh, I see Dr. Brunson in the audience. I just have to say that like her course in anthropology and development really helped my thinking. Enjoyed all of the readings for that class, and that's sort of where the light bulb started.
Mm-hmm. Can you say something about the connection between personal development and development from an NGO perspective?
Sure.
And John Zern acknowledges that's a very broad question.
Sure. So I think from development from both personal and NGO perspective, I think it's enmeshed in progress. And thinking about like linear time too, like as time progresses, there's a specific timeline as well, the modern one, and it seems like others are far behind, and the ones who are far behind, development is needed for them to catch up to a certain like iteration of modern time today. And then I think it's easy for individuals to make that jump because of our understanding, or maybe like, yeah, our understanding and everyday interaction with children or babies or students, and thinking about over time, it's almost a given that linguistic ability is developed, different skills are developed, motor skills are developed, but also I think that hides some of the regressions that are hidden. So I'm thinking about like I don't know if people have seen the Tampax Like a Girl commercial where older individuals are asked, what does it mean to play like a girl or fight like a girl or run like a girl? And so the older individuals are very mockingly running like in a funny way or fighting in a very cat-ish way. Whereas if they asked girls 10 years old and younger, what does that mean? They're taking it to mean as fast as we can. And so I think also like what is hidden in development and as time moves and we develop these other skills is what is like also like notions of gender inequality that we start to believe and embody. Yeah, so that thought went all over the place. But yeah, those are some of the things I was thinking about.
And Carol Lee is saying, sending lots of love to you, Stephanie. Such an honor to have listened to your beautiful writing. I loved how you connected individual stories to communities, and your point about the dangers of repeating a single story about a population is so relevant, even if we have good intentions.
Thanks, Carol. Thank you so much for coming.
Mm-hmm. Other questions or comments? Why Cornell?
Why Cornell? That's a good question. I think I was looking for a program that was welcoming of interdisciplinary background because I had sort of an unsuccessful first round of applications for PhD in English. So specifically, I was looking for students whose projects were maybe focused on like American studies, and that sort of project was embraced. And yeah, so I think Cornell does a really good job of that. I believe one of the key phrases that Ezra Cornell says is any person, any study. Just meaning like anyone who comes will find something of use and study here. And I think interdisciplinarity is big here.
Mm-hmm.
Is Ruth unable to make it, Kim?
We've been waiting for her to log in, and it hasn't happened. We were checked up and all set up, but that's why that happened. So we're winging that to a certain degree, and Cindy stepped in a moment there. Any other questions or comments? What kind of relationship do you see between the kind of relational, expansive, interdisciplinary kind of writing you were doing in what has won the Biography Prize and the kind of expository writing you've had to do in various other kinds of situations? Do you really see a sharp divide there, or are you finding ways of sort of integrating both into each other as you're meeting all the kind of writing demands? And I'm sure there's quite a number of them at the moment.
Yeah. So I think the kind of writing that I've been drawn to the most in any discipline is the kind that brings different genres together. And I especially do enjoy when authors or scholars in a way, bring themselves into it. So I'm thinking about like consuming ocean islands. I'm thinking about what was that one? The memoir by Deborah Miranda. I'm thinking about Rolling the R's by Zach Lemmark. Anything that bends genre and discipline, I'm very drawn to. I think it is more realistic in a way. Yeah, I think I like things that keep questioning itself, kind of like what I do in the biography essay, is that I really hope I'm not writing towards answers. I hope that, as you can see, like more questions come up and there's more of like a scattering rather than like a whole story. And I also think that does tie into with development and the idea of like tying things to a neat whole or getting to the end point. Yeah, so anything to disrupt any type of linear rationale thinking, writing, I quite enjoy or seem to be drawn to.
Okay. And we'll do a last call for questions here. And if not, I'd like to have everybody wait. Okay, that's interesting. All right. There's suspense. There's a disruption of linearity. Okay, Zoe has cried out, wait. All right. From a participant, thoughts on her PC experience, especially as a first generation US experience, right? Meant first generation immigrant US experience. So I think people would like to hear more about the Peace Corps.
Okay, good question. And this ties into a question that Ruth also asked me, which she was asking me why in the piece does China come off so specific? Like I never even mentioned the word China as a nation, but it's always set in Beijing at a specific place, like in an apartment. In America is the opposite. It's kind of this large looming abstract thing that is America. And one of the things that ties into the question that Zoe put there is I think that I was never asked to represent China as an abstract entity to others overseas, as I was told to do or trying to do with the Peace Corps. And I also think that being in China at age 6 was a pretty tactile experience. It was never in my thoughts much about the nation, more about my grandparents' apartment and their cassette tapes that I was allowed to listen to. And I feel like I could have thought about the US in more tactile ways as well if I wasn't asked to, in the Peace Corps, think about so much like what are the core values of America, how can you embody and present it. It's a job that is quote unquote 24/7. You're always on, meaning you're always a representative somehow of the nation. And yeah, so that was interesting, I think, as a immigrant coming in as well, because I don't think I bought it wholesale. But also in a way, like this experience makes me think about America less as a tactile, endearing
small town place in my mind, and much more as, okay, this abstract idea with values going out, and there's a role that I'm playing there. Yeah, so hopefully that kind of answered both questions at once.
Okay, and thank you. So if there aren't any more questions, I'd like to continue to extend congratulations for winning the Biography Prize, which was originally established by George Simpson to encourage life writing among graduate students at the University of Hawai'i at Manoa. You're in a long and distinguished tradition of very fine writers, and you've added to that. And I'd also like to have everybody who's participated today join me in thanking you for your talk and congratulating you on the prize. And John Zerns added, really good to see you. Stephanie, best wishes to you, and please keep in touch. And Zoe has responded, thanks for a fantastic talk. Okay.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of this and being talk number 785.
Yeah.
Very honored. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. And I hope we'll see you next week and in the weeks to come. And the information about upcoming events is in the chat. Thank you.